Hey everyone, it's Andrew with the Ridgeline Division Shops. This time around I'm going to do a series of videos covering my build, BNSF 9487, which is an SD70MAC in the old Burlington Northern, I believe it's called the Executive livery. You can see these around on the rails still, but the paint jobs are pretty beat up these days, so we're going to try to replicate that through the painting and the weathering that we do. Obviously, we're starting with a Kato unit, as usual, and the first step, as always, is disassembly of the locomotive shell. So I'll get that done, and then we will talk about the steps that need to be taken. Alright, so I have it disassembled. As you can see, this is one of the older Kato models, separate handrails and walkway pieces. Those are going to need to be painted different colors anyway, so we'll separate them out now, but for now we'll be putting those aside. The primary pieces that we're going to be working on initially, the long hood and the cab itself. The modifications we're going to be doing include grab irons on the front and over the cab and over the nose. Of course, sunshades, see-through grills, photo etch fan blades, and of course grab irons on the back as well, and then any other details, lift rings, any other details that that come along as we're going. So the way to do those obviously are through drilling and cutting. First thing I usually do is I make the large drilling holes in the fans, and the way I do that, I'll start with any smaller drill bit to drill a pilot hole, and then use larger and larger bits to widen the hole out. And once it's wide enough, you know, check your etched grills to make sure that you don't go too wide. But once it's wide enough, then just glue on the grills. So we'll get that started. I'll show you one, and then we'll get the rest done. Alright, so now that we've got that hole opened up, obviously I'll have to do that 2 more times here, and then once more on that front grill there. But now that you've got the hole opened up, I will take my X-Acto blade, or in my case my scalpel blade, and I will run my blade along the edge just to widen it out a little bit, make it even, cut out any excess plastic that you don't need. So I'll take my blade along the edge, just kind of circle it out, make it just wide enough to get off any excess plastic that we don't want in there. And so now you can see I've created a ring kind of based on that, in the first ring on the inside of the primary housing itself. So now I've got a pretty round ring there. And from here I'll take a file and I will file it out slowly, and I'll keep checking with the etched grill piece to make sure that it fits, and I'll just kind of widen it out until it's right to the edges of that etched grill piece. So we'll get that done, and I'll show you how it's done. Okay, so I've got that widened out with the file, and now we'll go ahead and test the piece to make sure that it fits. What is that? There it is. Alright. So I'll grab my photo etched fan grill and just kind of size it over to make sure that it will fit. It looks like we're almost right on, so maybe just a little bit more cleanup work, and then that'll be good to go. So I'll get that cleaned up, I'll get those other ones done, and then we'll come back and move on to the next step. Alright, got that all done, made a bit of a mess, but that's why the paper towel is down. Cleaned up the flash and the sanding dust, and I think we've got some pretty good openings there. I will leave the grills off for now, but I will apply them before I paint the model. I don't want them getting knocked off while I continue to work on it. So we'll move right into the next step. The next step will be adding grab irons. You see that there? There it is. Grab irons, 18-inch drop grab irons on the back, on the front, wherever they're needed. I know that there are templates available to do this, but the templates, in my opinion, have very limited usefulness. So what I do is I just visually measure out the spacing. It looks like these grab irons are just slightly wider than the molded on grab irons. So what I'll end up doing is I'll end up drilling, put that down, I'll end up drilling a hole just on either side of the molded on grab irons in the same place on each one, so that they have symmetry and evenness between them. When it comes to grab irons like this long one here, I'll just drill a hole on either side of it, and I will just bend out some wire to make that fit. Same thing with the V-shaped iron on the top, and don't forget on the nose, there are obviously these 4 grab irons along the front or down the front. There's that one there and that one there on this model, and there also will be some grab irons running across the windshield, so we'll drill out the holes for those and then bend those out as well. So we'll get that started, and I'll show you, like I said, I'll show you one and then I'll do the rest. Oh yes, and I forgot to mention the number 80 drill bit, the ubiquitous number 80 drill bit. That's the one to use, although I think it might be a little too large for these grab irons, but it'll work. Once you add the super glue and whatnot, it does fill in the hole, and it's really not noticeable, but maybe even 82 might work, though I've never tried it. So anyway, I'll get that started and we'll get going. Alright, I wanted to talk for just a second about something that I discovered. When I measured out the grab iron against the front moldings, they end up being about the same width. So I can't do the same thing I did on the back. The back, they are narrower, so on the back I will use I will drill a hole on either side, but on the cab I'm gonna have to actually cut down these the upper parts of the molding, just that top part of the molding, like that. Shave that down just slightly on either side, and then I'll actually drill the hole right into that shaving before I clean off the rest of the molding. That way the width is still there, it doesn't stretch the grab iron either way. But having said that, the molded on grab iron on the top was actually too narrow and positioned way off to one side. I didn't want the grab iron going off onto that other angle on the hood, on the nose. So I drilled one hole inside that arch, and then I measured it to make sure that I drilled the other hole such that the grab iron would fit there. On this situation here, I'll end up drilling one on either side. So, you know, just adapt to the situation. Make sure you test fit, measure twice, cut once. You don't want to mess it up because, man, when you start messing them up, they're hard to fix. So you might as well get it right the first time. So measure them all out, but those are the different ways to handle if they're wide enough, or if they're too narrow, or if they are offset too far and you don't want to run off onto the next piece. So I'll get these all drilled out, and then we'll come back and move on to the next step. Alright, so we'll have all those holes drilled out. You can see I've drilled out the holes for the V on top. Don't forget about the holes here on, I think, the blower housing. And then, of course, all done on the back. The next step, once you finish these up, and of course, might as well show you the cab. Got it all drilled out on the top, on the front, on the roof, and of course the holes for those eyebrows as well. So once you've got that done, the next step is go ahead and take your blade and just kind of shim off those molded on details there. Just very carefully kind of slice them off. Don't want to take too much, don't want to cut any gouges into the plastic. So you take one off, and then once you've done all of them, take some sandpaper and just carefully sand it down smooth. Now what this does is it helps with painting and with applying decals. These little details can cause any masking tape that you have to lift slightly, allows for, you know, bleed under, things like that. So you follow this step and you'll end up with a tighter lines, especially when there are demarcations like the BNSF paint jobs tend to have, etc. So I'll get that finished up, and I didn't realize, but I think I'm running a little long, so I'm going to call that part 1, and then I will come back in part 2 and continue on with the detailing. All right, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.